Welcome back to the BookEnds YouTube channel. I'm James McGowan.
I'm Jessica Faust.
And we are literary agents who have taken our popular blog to YouTube to discuss all things publishing. If you joined us last week, you know we talked about why querying takes so long. So today we want to give some insight into the process that an agent takes to sell your book to a publisher. And
or in other words, why the hell does it take so long?
Exactly. You took the words right out of my mouth.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. So yeah, well, okay. So you started from the last video, right? Now you've completed that process. You have signed with an agent. Congratulations. Today you're getting ready to go out on submission. What the hell do I expect?
It's going to take a long time.
It's going to take a long time. So in the last video, we talked about how many submissions an agent gets. So now consider how many submissions an editor gets. Sure, it's significantly less than what an agent is getting because there is not as much unsolicited. All of their submissions are coming through an agent. But consider how many agents there are, how many clients they have, and how many books go out on submission in any given month. And an editor likely has a lot of books in their inbox. The difference between an editor and an agent is that they are probably in some capacity reading a chunk of those books because they're more polished, they're from contacts they have made and harvested with their colleagues, and they can trust. So we're going to start that process, but they also have a backlog the same way an agent has that backlog.
Yeah, and they also have way more steps to getting approval. Most agents, or at least at BookEnds, each agent really can just make their own decision. So I can finish a book right now and call an author right now and offer representation. Editors can't do that.
That's my favorite part about being an agent. Nobody is really telling me no besides the author if they want.
No, it's true though. I mean, but editors have to go through, once they finally read that book and like it, now there's a huge series of steps the editor has to go through before they can even call the agent with an offer.
Yeah, but before we even get to those steps, something to consider in terms of editor response times is just like an agent, they have a full job that they have to do.
Yeah.
So many days throughout the week, an editor will spend that either on phone calls or now mostly everything is a phone call, but in meetings with their team, cover designers and production and all of this stuff. They're having conversations about the books that they've already bought. And how they're going to launch that, marketing, all of this. Yeah. And those meetings are time consuming. They are often, they are involved. So that takes up a big chunk of their time during the day. So editors might often find themselves like an agent reading their queries and submissions in their free time.
Yep, subway rides are great for that.
Exactly. So now they have done all of their job. They have read the submission. They want to take it. Now it goes through, like you were saying, that whole process. And that process is like, depending on the publishing house, is anywhere from like 2 to 8 steps.
Yeah, and it does differ, but I think generally it's the same with all publishers. I always tell my authors, expect it to take at least, if not more, 2 weeks before the editor can even get to your book. And then I always feel like the process from liking the book to getting to being able to offer is, again, at least 2 weeks, sometimes a lot more.
Yeah, something to consider is you will see it all the time on social media now, like the books that go like that, right? The books that go like that are either the exception or they didn't really go like that.
Yeah, that's my favorite thing about social media is the impressions. Things happen at like the speed of light. And definitely, I have had books that I've sold within 24 hours of submitting, right. But in 20 years, it's pretty rare. Yeah. So, I think there's it's sort of like the sense on social media that this author had an instant career just because nobody noticed the previous 10 books they'd published.
Or, how long they were querying or how long they were on submission with the book. Sure, it might seem like that book sold fast, but really you're not tracking it,
right?
Take everything on social media, like take that instantaneousness with a grain of salt. That's not a word, but take it with a grain of salt.
And also, it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
just because a book sells fast doesn't make it more successful than a book that took 6 months to sell.
Well, I say it's like lightning in a bottle. So it is lightning in a bottle that editor picked up that book at that time, fell in love with it. It's the same thing with an agent too. It's lightning in a bottle that we opened your submission, sat down, had the time to really just read it and fall in love with it.
Right,
So
right.
it feels like every sort of great happening in publishing is lightning in a bottle.
Yep. Okay, so now the editor loves the book.
Right.
Now we have next steps. And
right.
These can kind of cross over. There's almost always second reads. So what that means is that now the editor needs backup. The editor needs other people to go, I loved it too.
Yeah. And consider how long it took you to get that editor to read that book, right? Now we're juggling 2, 3, 4 more editors' timelines to read that book.
Yeah. And this could happen, I guess, roughly 2 different ways that I can think of. One way is that the editor reaches out to maybe their superior, maybe a couple superiors, and then maybe just a couple colleagues who are not necessarily superior at the same level, and will say, I really love this book. Can you do a second read? The second way those second reads tend to happen is that the editor presents the book in front of the editorial board or at the editorial meeting. So each week, publishers typically have an editorial meeting where the entire editorial staff, those who acquire books, sit down at a table and discuss upcoming projects, things that have sold, some things they've bought. The idea is that they're building their list. They're discussing what they want to publish as a team within the next year. Yeah. So it could be, instead of just asking people, it could be that the editor presents the book at the editorial meeting. And at that point, sometimes the editor-in-chief, sometimes people will volunteer to do second reads, and sometimes the editor-in-chief will assign people, and sometimes it's a little of both. So there are 2 ways that second reads can happen. It depends on the publishing house, it depends on the project, it depends on the editor. There's no sort of hard and fast rule, but the hard and fast rule usually is that there are second reads happening.
Yeah. And then you were saying that it goes to an editorial team. Sometimes that editorial team is like the bigger acquisitions meeting, and then sometimes it's 2 steps too. So like you'll go to the editorial team, and then you'll go to a second meeting with the entire sales, marketing, all of that.
It depends. Yeah, it really depends on the book and the publisher. And sometimes it doesn't go to a meeting with sales. It could just be passed off to a couple of sales reps to read it. It could be that you send them a report. It could be a bajillion other things. But yeah, sometimes it needs approval just from the editorial board and the editorial director. And sometimes they also want approval on a larger level to make sure that marketing feels there's potential there and sales feels there's potential there.
Yeah, and that could be, like we said, structured meetings, or it could be everybody's everywhere right now. So we're going to send it to this person, send it to this person, and then we're going to corral all their answers. Yep. So naturally, there's not a very set timeline.
Right.
Unfortunately.
So once, now let's say everything is going swimmingly and we have approval from everybody. Now the editor needs to run numbers, which means that they need to run a P&L, a profit and loss statement, on the book to determine how much they think they can offer in advance. Typically, an advance is expected to earn out within the first year. So whatever they pay the author, they predict that they will sell enough books that within the first year of sales, the author will start earning royalties because their advance has earned out. And we've done other videos on advances, so we can definitely link more information on that. And there's definitely information on the blog. But numbers have to be run. And that, again, involves sales and the operations department, paper costs, cover costs, the art department. All of these numbers have to go into play when determining how much a book, a sales department has to say, we think we can sell this many copies. Paper costs play into it. How much does a cover going to cost? All of these things go into play in a P&L. At which point, finally, the editor is given the go-ahead. Well, no, then the editor usually has to go back to potentially the editor-in-chief, the publisher, whoever makes these final decisions who will then say, yes, you can go and offer this. And then an offer is made.
Yeah, and then consider, just because an offer is made, that doesn't mean your process is done.
No.
Right, because now it's in your and your agent's hands, and your agent is then alerting all of the other editors who have the book in their submission pile. That process could potentially happen at all of those editors' houses, and then we see if you have other offers and how to handle it from there before entering the negotiation phase.
Yep. And then we negotiate, which can take a day. And it can take weeks. Negotiating can take weeks. I mean, nothing about this business is fast. And again, part of that is that there has to be a lot of conversations. Your agent isn't just going in and negotiating. They're also having conversations with you and maybe potentially negotiating multiple offers from multiple publishers.
Yeah.
And then in all of those steps, the editor usually has some leeway in the offer they've made, but typically they also have to check, can I do this? They now want this. Can I go up? Can we give them this royalty? Can we give them this option? Can we give them this territory? There's lots of conversations that happen in the negotiation process, which is why and I think too, in this world we're living in now, where people are not all in an office, it takes longer, because it doesn't mean I can just run down the hall and stick my head in your office when you hang up the phone and ask you a question. It means that I have to try to find you wherever in the world you live.
Yeah, and then just managing a schedule on your terms, like that person is now on a call and I didn't know that because I can't see them. So all of that plays into it.
Yeah. So I think in a nutshell, that's why it takes so long. Did we miss anything?
No, that's pretty much everything. And then, of course, how long it takes for you to announce it, which will drive every author crazy. So yeah, usually when contracts are done, that's when you get to announce your book. And it feels like an eternity in that space.
Well, should we talk about how long contracts can take?
Yeah, so a contract, we used to say that a contract could take anywhere from like 4 to 8 weeks from the contracts department, but I would say that was pre-COVID. Post-COVID, everything is taking a lot longer. People are working from home. They don't have those files that they can pluck at any given point. It takes a lot longer.
We are seeing contracts take up to 6 months to even get the initial contract from the publisher, and it's frustrating.
Yeah, and an agent your agent should be on top of that, but that does prolong the process of finalizing your agreement, getting you paid, and usually a publisher will wait until that agreement is finalized to announce, in case there are any subsidiary rights deals that we can include, or some agents just prefer to have a contract before they announce. So that could take a long time.
The contract process itself is very tedious.
Yeah.
So we have a boilerplate with every publisher, but that doesn't mean that we just get a contract we sign off on, because every contract has its own nuance. So if it takes the publisher, let's be generous, 4 to 6 weeks to get us the initial contract, they have to draft it, make sure they use our boilerplate, make sure they're getting the correct terms that we negotiated with the editor, and they're putting that contract together. It's not just, pulling it out of a bin and tossing it at us. There's things that have to go in there.
There's a lot of moving parts in the contract. A lot. Every word is a moving part.
And once we get the contract, it can take 2 weeks for us to fully evaluate, review, and every single contract has something that needs to be negotiated, boilerplate or not. So we have a couple of weeks. We are sending over our points to the publisher, and then everything is slow. Then we have to wait for the contracts person to come back on our points. And
which can take, again, 2 weeks, or it can take a month or 2 months, which hopefully, again, is not acceptable, but hopefully it's quicker than that.
And it's pretty rare that that's it. Then we go back to them and say, okay, we can accept this, but we still can't accept that. And then they can go back and we can't give you that, but we can give you this, and we can agree to this, but not this, and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And sometimes it can be fast and sometimes it can take weeks. Then you get the contract, and then hopefully you can sign it, and then hopefully they can sign it, and then we're done. But there is a ton of back and forth. And for anybody who's never seen a publishing contract, 13, 15 pages on legal size paper in tiny font is pretty normal. So it's a lot to review, and it's not just
even like physically to sit there and read it and not get a headache. You are pretty impressive. Like it takes some time to digest, and then also to be in the right mindset to think it over and negotiate it strategically. All of that, it takes time.
Yeah, and in each contract, each author and their career needs to be considered differently from each contract, because I need to consider what your goals are for career, what else you're writing, what other contracts you're under. I need to consider all of that when I'm reviewing the contract and going back to the publisher. So it's a process.
A long one. Yes.
You must be in the middle of one because you looked so tired.
Yeah, it's a long it is. And then we're doing that, like you said, for hopefully many clients at a time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, well, we hope that was helpful insight into what the process is like to submit and sell your book. Join us back here next time for why it takes so long for, once this process is done, for your book to actually publish, because there's a lot there that I don't think a lot of authors might realize. So we hope to see you back here next time. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss that video, and see you soon.
Bye.